Hello there, everyone. I'm Gaylen Morse, and welcome to Journey to Recovery. We appreciate having you along today. Our topic today is strategies to overcome problem gambling. We'll take a look at how substance use disorders can also have some cross-addiction elements. Some people who are in recovery end up trading one addiction for another. Our host is Dr. Hal Baumchen, a licensed clinical psychologist and licensed alcohol and drug counselor. He's an author, speaker, and clinician with over 30 years of counseling experience. I'm here today with Tim Bode, Operations Director at Northland Counseling Services, and with Dr. Hal Baumchen, our host at Journey to Recovery. Hey, guys.
Hey, Gaylen. Thanks for the nice introduction.
You're welcome.
Hello,
Dr.
Dr. Baumchen. Nice to see you.
Nice to be here. Well, we're talking on, on this set in Gaylen's studio, and we're video recording it, which we've done now for some time. We did audio podcasts at first and kind of switched it up and went to video. So, which is sort of weird because we're not actually on television. We're just recording on video what we do in an audio studio.
And so why are we doing that again?
Well, I think it's kind of nice. Not only does my wife like to watch it, but I think people like to be able to kind of see what's going on. It gives one more element to it. I also think, of course, the audio podcast is appropriate, like if you're in the car or something.
Yes, don't watch the video podcast in the car.
Yes. Of course, in my car, I'd have to reach to the back seat because that's the only place to watch videos. So that's
or on your phone. You could watch it on your phone, a video on your phone while you drove. But of course, we're not recommending that.
No, don't give me any bad ideas.
Right.
Yeah.
So what are we talking about today?
Well, today we're talking about gambling problems. What's up with that?
Yeah, so typically on this program we focus on co-occurring disorders, substance use, and mental health disorders. So are we switching gears here?
Well, not really, Tim. What I thought we could talk about, we always talk about some problem that goes along with addiction, maybe depression or anxiety or burnout or stress or family problems or something. But sometimes people end up moving from one addiction to another. So when they quit using substances, and sometimes I hear they quit using methamphetamine and I only use alcohol now, which is not much of a trade, certainly not a trade up. And then sometimes quit drugs and alcohol and move to something like overeating or shopping or gambling. So we're going to talk about a couple of those. We're going to talk about gambling today.
How are gambling problems similar to substance use disorders?
Well, I think there's almost like a behavioral addictive component to it. So neurologically or neurochemically, I think there's some dopamine that's firing in the central nervous system, which is your brain stem and your brain and spinal cord. And so you get a little rush when you use drugs. Like, wow, that was good. And glutamate says, I'm going to remember that. And the same kind of thing can happen with gambling, or later, maybe on our next podcast, we'll talk about shopping. And when you find that thing that makes you feel good, you get a little dopaminergic rush. Same thing with gambling.
Mm-hmm. And certainly both of them carry can carry financial consequences, right? Drug use, that kind of addiction, and gambling addiction.
Right. And both are dragging your finances down, unfortunately.
Yes, right.
And we'll talk about this a little bit later, but it can cause you to want to do illegal activities in order to afford both of those. Both gamblers can run into that problem. I just want to say that, gambling is legal. In our state, we have places you can go gamble, or some forms of gambling are in fact legal. So people kind of use gambling recreationally, just like alcohol and drinking is legal. You just have to be really careful with how you do it. So I don't want to necessarily say all gambling and all levels is always wrong, but gambling can become a problem.
Mm-hmm. And I'm assuming that gambling problems are often hidden from family and friends.
Right. I think back to you spend money or lose too much money, and so you end up being a little bit ashamed of that or feel guilty about that. And rather than quit it, I'd rather keep doing it and hide it. So you're right.
Yeah.
How do mood disorders interact with gambling?
Well, I wonder if you could have a mood disorder, and then in order to comfort yourself or distract yourself, you might find something like gambling. The other way around it is you do a bunch of gambling, lose some money, start chasing losses, feel horrible about the losses, and end up feeling depressed, guilty, sad, remorseful, low energy, low motivation. So you have the mood disorder secondary to the gambling, or you have the mood disorder that sort of primes the pump to go gambling.
So you were a little bit ago talking about how gambling is legal and some gambling can be okay. So is it difficult to distinguish between socially acceptable gambling and problem gambling?
Right. Even on the way over here when we were talking, it seemed like, some people gamble and they say that, they had a good time, but I'm just wondering if they're starting to cross a line. Is it becoming a problem? And I think, to your point, it is difficult to tell whether it's recreational and having a good time, or now you want to chase those losses and it's becoming a problem. Do you ever hear from friends about their gambling, Gaylen?
I have several friends that enjoy what you'd call socially acceptable gambling. And yet they always come home and tell me how much they've won, but I've never heard a word about how much they've lost.
Yeah. Or how much, And even like, hey, I won $700 at the casino. How much did you bring home with you? Well, none.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
Right.
the other key. We used to go up north in Minnesota, and we'd go past a casino. Well, casinos always have pretty good food. So we'd stop in to eat, and we walked by a guy that was winning. He was this is old story because it was a quarter machine. It wasn't electronic. And the quarters were just pouring out of this machine. The bells and whistles were all going off. It was wonderful. I'm sure that totally psychologically designed to just get you pumped.
Yeah. So there's a lot of cues, a lot of signals to keep you engaged. They tell me... we were laughing before we started the broadcast about having a clock that didn't work, but in the casinos, I think oftentimes it's pretty hard to find a clock.
No clocks.
I mean, everybody has maybe a watch or a cell phone, but the casino itself is not going to remind you should get going now.
Well, we went and ate dinner that night, and when we came back, that guy who'd won buckets of quarters had about 1.5 inches, 2 inches of quarters left in one bucket.
Yeah.
He had poured them all.
Right, back into the machine,
Yeah.
So since this is a co-occurring podcast normally, I'm wondering about the interaction of gambling and substance abuse, and if those could play off each other.
One makes the other one worse,
yes,
I'll
right,
bet, yeah.
Exactly.
Just like Gaylen was asking about those mood disorders, could you have one before you started gambling? If you had substance use disorder, might you start gambling? And I do see those tied together for people that maybe they don't gamble unless they're drinking or unless they're high. But as soon as they are, alcohol impairs judgment, and like, I'm not going to gamble, but then you have a few drinks, like suddenly going to the casino is a great idea, or betting on something is a great idea. And they wouldn't have done that. So I do think they interact with each other. Substance use and gambling do interact with each other. And if you lost a lot of money, I think there's a wish to escape that emotional pain, and you can sometimes do that with a substance, or try to.
Yeah.
I'm sure when you're drunk or high, losing that money just doesn't seem to be the big deal that it would be if you were sober.
Yeah, and like you said, Dr. Hal, when they do lose money, they're probably looking for a way to escape the pain and end up using more drugs or alcohol.
Right.
Yep.
I'm just thinking about what you said, Gaylen, where you sort of wake up in the morning and now you're broke and sober, and the pain is really hitting you
Ouch.
hard. Yep, exactly.
So why do people keep gambling even after they've had some really serious losses?
Right. That's a great question. So here you are. You went to have a good time, and then you ended up withdrawing money from your debit card or something and got more cash and did that a couple more times. So now you've spent a lot of money. And in fact, I like saying you spent the rent check, the money that you were going to pay your rent with. And so you can't possibly go home and tell your loved one, hey, I just gambled away our rent money for the month. And so I think sometimes people try to win that money back. And so losing money can keep a gambler gambling. But amazingly, winning money can keep a gambler gambling. Like that guy with the 3 or 4 buckets or several buckets of quarters. He's done now. He should go home, cash out, enjoy his little winnings here. No, he wants more. I know the secret to success here, and so he's hoping that this machine or another machine is going to pay out again, and he wants that thrill, that win again. So 2 major forces that keep a gambler gambling: winning and losing.
Right.
Now you might be saying that doesn't propel me into gambling. I lost money and never gambled again. Oh, well, let's say it this way. It has to be a gambler. What keeps a gambler gambling is winning and losing.
I'm sure it's stressful to face the people and the consequences when you've had a series of losses.
Yeah, right. Oh, the consequences, it's not just your misery. I think it can be the anger of somebody and bills to pay and bill collectors calling you on the phone. So, boy, there can be a lot of consequences, then maybe even some legal ones, maybe in trouble for the substance use because they're interacting with each other. So absolutely, the consequences start building up. And if you thought you were anxious and stressed out before you went gambling and you wanted to get some relief, well, now you've added to your own problems and the consequences have built and created even more anxiety and stress.
Right. Now, there are some signs of having a gambling disorder, and we're going to talk through some of those.
Trying to make a distinction between just somebody who does some recreational gambling, doesn't get in any trouble with it, and again, it's legal in many states, legal here where we live, versus somebody who's having some trouble, and what's the difference and how would you know?
Right.
So that's what we're trying to look into.
I would think one of the things you'd look for, like in any addiction, the gambler needs to gamble with increasing amounts of money to achieve the same level of excitement.
Right. So that guy you were talking about, he uses quarters for a little while and wins. So that feels good. And then he starts losing all of his quarters. And one of the gamblers that I talked with, he's just throwing more money at it to like win it back quickly. So if he's at the blackjack table, then he's losing $5 at a time. But to get that back, he starts betting 50. So yeah, he's throwing more money at it, or not necessarily per hand, but more money at it per outing.
Yep. Another sign is that the gambler exhibits restless or irritable behavior when they attempt to cut down or stop their gambling.
Like any drug, the withdrawal effects.
Right.
So it makes you nervous, tense, irritable, and anxious, and like you have this urge to go to the casino or get a scratch-off ticket or try to buy a lottery ticket or whatever your form of gambling is, or betting on a horse race or something. And there's just this urgency almost, and you go ahead, duct tape yourself to the chair. Yeah, but that made me anxious and irritable. I tried to make myself stop, and I couldn't.
And probably another one would be very much preoccupied with thoughts or feelings about gambling.
Right. Same thing with chasing substance use, where you're thinking about, getting the alcohol and having friends over and getting drunk and going to the bar. Same with the gambling, thinking about where you're going to go and get to the casino and when you're going to go and how much money and where you're going to get the money and all of that. So it's on your mind a lot.
then someone with a gambling disorder will often gamble when they feel distress. If they're anxious
like
or
depressed.
depressed.
Mhm.
Yep.
So those negative emotions or those difficult emotions are actually prompts and cues and signals that I need relief, and I find relief through the gambling.
Someone with a gambling problem often chases their losses, returns another day to get even.
Right. I can't stand this feeling, and the only way I lost $1,500. Where can you get $1,500 in a moment's notice? Like, oh, maybe the casino. Mm-hmm. And so, they're trying to get that money back, trying to win that back, and I can't face family members.
Yeah. Another sign of a gambling disorder is when you start to lie to conceal the extent of your gambling.
So lying, as we talk about in substance abuse, is just that bold-faced denial. I didn't go to the casino. It didn't happen. I didn't lose any money. And then minimization. So yes, I lost a little bit of money. I was there for an hour. Some kind of minimizing the difficulty and minimizing that it's a problem. Mm-hmm. I went to the casino, but it's not a problem. I don't have to go. I won't go. For a year probably. So some minimization, some denial, and then some rationalization. Hey, it's just an outlet. Everybody has a hobby. I took my mother. Fault me for that. I went with mom.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. I think it often reaches the point then where the person is willing to jeopardize a significant relationship, job, or opportunity, whatever, because of their gambling.
You would not think that's possible, but the same thing happens with substance abuse, where the addiction runs your life, and now the gambling is running your life. It's calling the shots in your life, and you're making sacrifices both with your time, your money, your relationships, and you're willing to kind of sacrifice all of them in order to sustain the addiction. Mm-hmm. It's a terrible thing.
And then the last sign that we have on our list today of a gambling disorder is that the person relies on others to provide money to relieve their desperate financial situations that are caused by their gambling.
Before you go on, do you have like a $500 I could borrow, Tim?
No, Hal.
So I think you're right.
What are you going to do with that money?
Yeah. So I'm going to go to casino and try to win back what I lost last night. So I think that happens where you finding ways to look for money, selling things, borrowing money, shortchanging another bill, and then trying to find some money to go gambling again.
There are some, there are some interesting statistics about the relationship of people with a gambling disorder and both substance use disorders and mental health disorders.
So people who gamble are likely to use alcohol. 72% of all the folks with gambling addiction or a gambling problem actually use alcohol. Mm-hmm.
And 38% also have a drug use disorder.
Right. So when you combine those two, you've really got some overlap here between people with gambling disorder problems and substance abuse problems. Mm-hmm.
And, of course, nicotine dependency.
Right.
I don't know about nowadays, but it used to be you walk into a casino, it was gray or blue with smoke.
Right. And the folks that come to the treatment center where I work, they don't all have gambling problems. Some of them do. But many of them have chemical dependency problems, and they have nicotine dependence as well. And then mood disorders comes up. So half of the folks that have a gambling problem also have a mood disorder. Again, I think gambling, like we mentioned earlier, can make the mood disorder worse.
Mm-hmm. And then 41% also have an anxiety disorder and 61% a personality disorder.
Right. So you see some mental health problems that are co-occurring or overlapping with gambling.
Let's give our listeners some suggestions to help them avoid gambling problems.
Well, I think one is never gamble for any reason other than as strictly a form of entertainment.
Right, and never gamble to try to win back your losses. And don't ever use money to gamble or spend money to gamble that you can't afford.
Right. And when you do gamble, if you gamble for entertainment purposes, decide ahead of time how much time and money you'll spend. So how much time you'll spend at the casino and how much money you'll
And then
spend.
stick to those limits, right? Draw that boundary and stick to it, you bet.
Never spend money you don't intend to spend or stay longer than you plan to stay.
Again, just like Tim was saying, like set a limit and then, don't run to the cash machine to get more money.
Right. So we also have some suggestions that can help you identify gambling issues or reduce temptation to gamble.
And one of those is just to talk through your gambling problem, maybe find somebody that would support you in trying to change your style here.
Yep.
Another one is to seek professional help if necessary. Find gambling resources or, like you said, a support group.
Avoid circumstances that entice or tempt you to gamble.
Right, like big events, sporting events like Super Bowl, and just be careful about that. Maybe get an accountability partner who knows you have trouble around those sporting events, and they're trying to give you alternatives. Maybe if you bet money or go on a cruise that has gambling on the ship, be careful about those kinds of things. See what you can do to set up your lifestyle so you don't engage in the gambling activity.
And as is also true if you're in recovery from substance abuse, surround yourself with positive people who support your recovery and avoid those who don't.
Right, both of those pieces, find people who know what you're up against and really support you, and then stay away from people who are going to drag you down. Thank you.
Right.
How about finding a positive substitution for gambling, such as a hobby, interest, or any activity that'll keep you from your previous gambling opportunities?
Right, so something that works directly against that. So maybe you play in racquetball and you make commitments, or you play volleyball on a team and you make a commitment. And sometimes a hobby or an activity like that can structure your time in such a way that it's more difficult to go gambling.
Our topic today was strategies to overcome problem gambling. You can download other materials that help you develop skills to identify emotional problems, reduce symptoms, and prevent relapse at journeytorecovery.com. We've been visiting with Dr. Hal Baumchen. His expertise and clinical wisdom is now available at journeytorecovery.com. I'm Gaylen Morse. Thanks for listening to today's program. See you next time on Journey to Recovery. Remember, recovery is a journey. Enjoy the ride.